Good evening, everybody. What's going on? Turn this stuff off. Hope everybody's having a good week. Had a great weekend. For everybody on the East Coast, Debbie has sure made a mess of things, but luckily us on the East Coast, we just got rain, some wind, nothing bad. I see the West Coast got hammered quite well. There's video of Bradenton Motorsports Park and the Freedom Factory. Their front entry road washed away. Hey, Mike, how you doing? Yeah, in fact, there's a video on Facebook. Garrett, a.k.a. Cletus, running his jet boat up and down Bradenton drag strip. Gets flooded so bad. I didn't get any reports of anybody else getting major flooding over there. Wade, the track manager of the drag strip, seemed to think it has a lot to do with all the construction in the area and the county not having proper drainage for all the new construction and stuff going on. So, once again, council members and government, county and state government, going for the money grab, letting people build houses in an area that weren't supposed to have any construction going on to preserve the racetrack, and now they've got houses less than a mile away, and they're actually breaking ground all around them now. So it's a real shame. Next Monday, we have a meeting. Speaking of that county government, we have a meeting with our county government to hear the updates on what's going on with the proposed Palm Beach County Motorsports facility. It's been kind of quiet for a while, but then again, government moves slow when they're not making money. That's just my opinion. But anyway, yeah. So we're supposed to have a meeting, public meeting on Monday, and they're going to give us all the updates. So I will be able to bring the updates to you guys on Tuesday night. So we'll see how that goes. Fingers crossed. They definitely said the property was allocated for motorsports, and the last meeting they had, there was some discussion about the ATV and motocross guys, and doing a joint venture. So we'll have to see how that goes. I know they're supposed to be doing I think it's RTF or something like that. That they check to make sure that that there's enough. That they can find the right people to invest the money in the property and stuff like that. I don't know. I think up until this point that has not been sent out. Hopefully this meeting will have something to do with that. So we will see. We'll see. That's all things in the future. So update you guys on what's going on in the shop. I've been thrashing on the Cup car. I tried to get it to the Brass Monkey Car Show last Friday night. That did not happen. And it was kind of a wishy-washy thing about it happening anyway. It was more of a deadline for me to push to get the car farther along. So with that being said, the car is really close. Basically, I just have to modify the Holly harness to fit the car the way I need it to fit, and put a seat in it, and it should fire up and run. I just have to do a couple little things. I still have the back window and side windows to install, but that wouldn't have stopped it from going to the car show. So anyways, that's one of the big things we got done. I got the faux Ford engine pretty much completely done. I think it came out really great. I'll show you. You guys will get first glimpse of that before anybody else does here in a couple minutes. And I have Mike's Trans Am just about ready to leave. And I'm missing some clips. He brought me the rest of the dash pieces that were missing. So he brought me those pieces, and I'm missing a couple clips, so they're coming. And the speedometer quit working. So I don't know if the gear is stripped or what. I got to get it on the lift and check that out. But otherwise, that car's ready to roll. And we made forward progress on Dave's Chevelle. I got the piece in the firewall. I cut and modified the transmission harness and finished that. And I have the Holley engine management harness cut down and all branched off into T's, and it's ready to be installed to make sure all the T trunks are in the right place before I put the covering on that. So that's really close. At that point, I'll be able to put the dash in, and then just have to wear the back of the car. Hey Ryan, how you doing? Truck is looking freaking awesome, dude. I can't wait to see that thing with some color on it. It's going to be great. Yeah, so once I get that harness in, I just have to bleed the brakes, put the fuel filter in and hook the line up, and run training cooler lines. Got a couple AC lines I got to finish up, but other than that car's getting really close. And I'm hearing that the body shop that has to do the cut and buff and fix a couple little things that they left loose, they're just about ready to have an opening. So I'm going to try to work really hard in the next month to get that car done, so we can get to the body shop and can move along to the next portion of the project. So today, I don't know if you guys were on Facebook or anything, or if you got notifications, but I did drop the part 1 video for the Cup car. Unfortunately, because I was thrashing on the car, I didn't really get any video of the car. It was all pretty much a slideshow, and I just discussed what I had done to it. Hopefully, people will still find it entertaining. We'll see. That's just unfortunate. That's how that part of the build went. I did it in small sections, and really wasn't time in between the jobs that I was working on to actually put a video together. So I just took pictures as I went, and then kind of just did a narration over the slideshow. So hopefully people will dig it and it'll go. Oh, okay. What'd you think, Mike? Was it pretty good, or Of course, the car's a lot farther along than what the video showed, but I do want to get some video for the next portion, and I do have a video for the engine build. So that I should be able to put that out next week. So anyway, like I said, I'm gonna probably give you guys a first view of what the faux engine in the car looks like. So let me split down to desktop, and you guys can take a peek at it. Oh, okay, decent. All right. So I wasn't sure. I'm glad you liked it, Mike. I wasn't sure how the slideshow with the narration was going to go, But anyway, let me show you some pictures of where the engine's at now. This is stuff that nobody has seen, except for maybe a couple local friends and stuff that have stopped by the shop. So that's the engine, which I'm sure we've talked about it before. It's a 6-liter, 30 over. And this is when I had it sitting on the stand. Forward valve cover is just kind of sitting on with bolts holding it on. But I did have the fake distributor mounted, and used ICT billet brackets just to kind of disguise the LS water pump, trying to make it not so easily recognized. A little side shot of it. I used the aftermarket dampener on the bottom, so that didn't, wasn't a cast iron Chevy style. It's got a GM intake, but of course with LS you can turn around, so the GM insignia that's on the manifolds on the back of the throttle body instead of in the front, so you can't really see it. If you look real close, you can see this bracket under the distributor cap. That's actually what I did was I took MSD billet distributor, machined it apart, and then I made a bracket they bolted down to the valley tray, and then welded that on there, and that gave me a position for the wires to go through, and they go behind the water pump and out to the sides of the block. I did that because I wanted, rather than having a stem, I wanted all the plug wires separated. I didn't like when all the plug wires are all crimped together, so I figured that way they have a lot of room to breathe, and hopefully won't have any cross arc problems. So there's pictures of the machine MSD distributor and the mounting bracket. So that opening is 2¼ inches, so it's got a lot of room for the plug wires to hang freely. The damper was a PRW. It's an economy priced unit, but it is SFI rated. I'm not 100% sure if it's US made or China. I'm hoping it's US made. But PRW makes a lot of PRW Industries. They make a lot of the rocker trunnion kits and push rods and all that kind of stuff. They own a few other companies that are part of the family, and a lot of those are American-made companies. So I'm hoping that they were American-made. I really didn't dig into that because I was thrashing. Like I said, I was trying to make the car show last Friday, so I just wanted something that didn't look stock on it, and I didn't want to spend ATI money on it. So this dampener was probably half the price, but it is key weight, so it does sit on the crank with a key weight, so you don't have to worry about it slipping. And they have them in different widths. This is a Chevy 5th gen Camaro spacing, but they also have it in the Corvette and the F-body spacing. And there's a picture you can see through the distributor cap itself. I actually drilled the spark plug contacts out of the cap, and that way the plug wires slide right through the cap, no problem at all. And there it is in the car. So at this point, I've got the proper alternator, I got the power steering on, I've got the Craftsman truck Elmore headers that I purchased. So at this point I had custom motor mounts that I built that go to the factory mounts on the chassis, and it was looking good, getting ready to start putting plug wires and stuff like that in. Just another view. So you can see the fuel injection harness is tucked in between the runners, and the grommet and all the wiring will come out directly behind the intake manifold. So once the big cowl air cleaner is on, all that should be hidden pretty well. And here it is. Yeah, so this is it with the adapters that hold the 4 valve covers on properly. And you can see, since the valve covers had the goofy twist breather caps on that always leak oil, I went ahead and put aluminum tubes through it, welded on the back side so there's no weld showing. I took DA and DA'd all the fins on the valve cover, and then ran the plug wires. And again, like I said, the plug wires drop down behind the timing cover, behind the water pump. Hey Kenny, how you doing? No, that's a Terminator Stealth. So the ECU sits inside the vehicle. So the same harness and everything that a Dominator and HP uses. It's just got the Terminator ECU. Yeah, so the plug wires just dropped through. I went ahead and put the appropriate heat shrink on the plug wires with the Ford HO firing order on it, and also labeled the spark plug ends with the same numbering. Although I didn't need it for the headers, I went ahead and put the DEI boot covers on it. I just figured it made it look a lot racier. I was going to show a few. Yeah, so then I don't think I have a picture of it, but I put the super coil there, the blaster coil, and I put a big plug wire boot over the coil wire, and that is all just, again, to hide a little bit of plug wire that you could see between the distributor cap and the water pump body. So with that stuff on there now, it takes your eye away from it, and it totally made it all go away. You can see in the back, I got the fuel line going up, got my buddy's Race Part Solution fuel filter and fuel lines and stuff on it. So it's coming together pretty good. I do have a Cal air cleaner coming for it now, so that'll be good. I do believe I'm going to have to put at least a 1-inch spacer under the throttle body to get it high enough to match up to the cowl and the firewall. But I think once I get all that done, it's going to look really good. Here's a good side shot of it. So, I mean, I think it's going to fool a lot of people. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. Yeah, Mike. Appreciate it. Yeah, I just did it for fun. It's a Ford car. I know Ford people are really angst about LS swaps and Ford products. So I figured, you know what? Let's see how smart these Ford guys, and if they can really pick it apart, they know that I did it anyway. Now, of course, when I go to LS Fest, the cat's going to be out of the bag for anybody that knows I'm there. And of course, the next part 2 video will let the cat out of the bag. But you know, it just I think it's just fun. I've seen some guys do this before, trying to make their LSs look like carbureted engines. Most of the time, they don't do a very good job of it. I've seen guys just glue a carburetor spacer to the top of a LS1 manifold, plastic manifold, and bolt a carburetor on it, and just hang a generator on it, and you know, think that's fooling people. But I think this is a pretty good facsimile. I think 90 to 95% of the people are going to be really confused when they see it. I know my buddy Doug that I got the car from, I sent him some pictures via Messenger, and he texted me back and said he had to double take, because he says, I knew you put an LS in there, but he goes, I wasn't sure when I saw the pictures. So, already worked. Already did what we wanted to do. Now here's the other side. So you can kind of see right in this area here that you could almost see the plug wires going through. So that's why I did the coil. Plus I needed a coil to make it look, you know, to finish off the look. So I don't know if I got a picture. Nope. What happened? Hang on a second. Nope. Sorry about that. Picture went away. That's got to be this one. Good old Windows. Yeah, so now this one has got the coil bracket actually on it. So I made a stainless coil bracket come up and mount the coil, so now it's hung, which totally blocks the driver's side of the engine off, and then the coil wire kind of wraps around the base of the distributor to finish it off. And the only other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull these heater hose plugs out of the water pump and cap them off, thread them in, and put screw-in plugs. So that'll also, one of the telltales of an LS engine, that loop hose on the trans, on the water pump for the heater core. So once those are plugged off, you know, most people haven't seen the engine in a NASCAR race car anyway. So hopefully, like I said, it's gonna fake people out pretty well. So that's what I got done on that thing. Let me get back up here. Get my ugly face on there. Okay, so yeah, so that's where I'm at with it. I got to order pipe this week because right now it's open header. I want to order some oval pipe and build some new boom tubes on it. We took them off the car because the exhaust was hitting the headers and they were pretty rotted. But I saw how they built them in a really easy 3-inch by 1.5-inch box tube, and then a 3-inch wide strip of metal, and they weld the two boxes together to make it look like 3 channels, and then they just connect the exhaust to the other side and build a funnel out of exhaust material to go from the oval pipe to the rectangle. So it'll be very easy to build. And this car had them on both sides, which I'm going to replicate, even though true cup cars only run it on one side, and that depends on the track they're running at. Hey, Bill, how you doing? Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I have to make the car have the look of my touches on it. So I did all stainless brake lines on it and all that, and it should come out really well. I don't have a whole lot of things left to do, but get it running this week and then start fixing up whatever little loose ends I have after I can make it drive up and down the road. Make sure the 4-speed transmission I have works. That came out of a rat rod that I put an automatic in. We kept the transmission hanging around from Doug's shop, so he was happy to donate that in. So we got that in there. Obviously, that's not a racing transmission, but at this point, I'm not spending $4,000 or $5,000 for a used race transmission that I don't know if it's going to work or not, and I'm not sure what we're doing with the car. So, hey, Chris, glad you made it in. Ryan says the Ford boys will be coming with pitchforks and torches. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, but at least this way, they're going to be fooled first, and then they'll be extra mad. The other way, they'd just be mad right from the get-go as soon as they saw it was an LS engine. But being now that they might believe it's a Ford engine for a bit, that'll even make it more fun and make them even more pissed off. I love it. Can't help it. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Chevy GM guy. I like all cars, but that's my preference. So we'll see how it comes out. I can't wait to get it out on the streets and see what people's opinions are. Like I said, some of the guys that came around the shop and looked at it were confused a little bit. They knew I was doing an LS engine, but yet they look at the distributor and they go, "How did you do that?" And the way I have it with the plug wires hanging behind the distributor, I can actually take a distributor boot off and pull the plug wire out and pick it up 2 or 3 inches, and you can see that the plug wire just keeps on going. So it kind of explains what I did there. So it'll be fun. I can't wait. So being I was really busy in the shop, I didn't get a whole lot put together. However, I just was bleeding the brakes on the car, and this car has twin masters with a balance bar. And in the past, I've always had a little issue bleeding those, because if you try to do conventional bleeding, you'll get the rear half of the rear master bled completely, and then you'll have problems with the front master because you lose some of the travel because of the way the pedal works. So when I ordered the master cylinders and I talked to Willwood about the sizing and getting all that stuff, I asked them about that, and they told me that to watch their video on purge bleeding, and I did, and it made sense. So I bought some purge bottles and I bled it that way, and boy, it's a one-man operation a two-man operation to do it 100%, but I was able to get 99% of the brakes bled by myself. So I thought, hey, maybe we should talk about brake bleeding. I don't know if we've ever gone over that on the channel, so that's what we're going to do tonight. So let me switch to the screen again.
So this is our conventional bleeding. We've all been doing this for years. One guy in the car pumping, the other guy opening the bleeder, starting, you always start the farthest from the master, so right rear wheel on a left-hand drive car. Hopefully we're using a catch bottle so we're not spraying fluid all over the shop and all over the floor and all over the components in the car. That's the way we've always done it, but for the last 4 years I've been a one-man shop. So either I can't bleed the brakes till I get somebody to swing by and help me, or if the wife is not working that day, I can get her to do some leg exercises. And of course, it's always fun when you're working with somebody that hasn't worked with you before. So you got to tell them to pump, and you're waiting for them to tell you that they've got, they're holding and whatnot. It just, when you have somebody you work with all the time, it goes very smoothly. When you're using somebody that may have only done it once or twice with you, it can be cumbersome at best, sometimes with the communication. And the other thing is with the car up in the air, and stereo playing in the shop and stuff, sometimes you can't hear real well. So that's the way we used to do it. So I've always been looking for better ways of doing it. And when I was talking to the guys at Willwood, and they were talking about purge bleeding, it immediately came to my mind that when we put a new master cylinder on, we always bench bleed it first. Put one of the ears of the master in the vise, put adapters that usually come in the master cylinder kit into the fittings, loop the hoses into the reservoir, fill the reservoir over the end of the hose, and clamp them or hold them so they stay under, the opening stays underneath the fluid level. And then you take a big screwdriver and you pump the master until it pushes all the air out of it. That's purge bleeding, because when you release, the fluid gets sucked back up the hose out of the reservoir and goes backwards. Then you pump and it pushes the fluid back, and it keeps going back and forth until it works all the fluid out. I never thought about bleeding a brake system like that. I just always thought that was a bench bleed for the master cylinder. But that's not how I've been doing it all this time in the shop. I've been working on a couple different ways. There is vacuum bleeding. So with a vacuum bleed, obviously you have to remove the cap from the master cylinder, and then you have a vacuum pump, whether it's a handheld or runs off of shop air, and you open and close the bleeder, and it sucks the fluid from the master cylinder through the lines and pulls all the air out of it. Sometimes it works really well, sometimes not so much. I don't know what the issue there is, but every now and then you'll get a system that will basically hydrolock and nothing happens. You're sucking and sucking and sucking, and no fluid comes out. You end up having to pump bleed it anyway. So that works most of the time, but it wasn't a good solution. So then I bought a pressure pot, which I've had one of these years ago, the old metal tank that you'd put fluid in and then put air on the bottom of the bladder, and it would push up on the bladder to force the fluid out of the hose and into the master cylinder. The problem back then was very few actual adapters for the master cylinder, so that always made it a pain in the butt. I had one of the, I think there was a mat kit that I had. They gave you some big solid blocks with a rubber point on there. You could push down in the master cylinder, but you could never really get it to work right, and you end up getting fluid all over the place because you've got the pressure pot set at 10 psi and it's flowing. So if there is a place for air to leak out, the fluid's going to come out after the air is pushed out. So it was just a mess, and because of the master cylinder adapters. However, I purchased another one of those kits. It doesn't work with my pressure pot, but it has a lot of the newer connectors to it, so it's been working pretty well. But now I've got this race car with Wilwood master cylinders, and I don't have an adapter for that. So again, back to no adapter for the master cylinder. So this is purge bleeding, just like we talked about with the master cylinder. So you remove the master cylinder cap because you want to be able to let air go in so fluid can displace, and you slowly push the brake pedal down and release, while with the bleeder open and with the catch hose going into a container that is submerged in fluid. So just like you have your master cylinder on a bench bleed, you have your lines submerged back in the reservoir. Here you're using an external reservoir. As long as the hose stays in the fluid, you work the pedal and I'll work the air out and won't allow any air in. You do have to make sure that you don't run the master cylinder dry because there's no fluid going into the master cylinder, and you have to keep an eye on the purge container that it doesn't overflow. But other than that, it's a fairly straightforward way to go. Now, on Wilwood's video, they show still using two people. One person pumps, and then when you're satisfied, hold the pedal down and then lock the bleeder screws, and then you pump the pedal till it builds pressure again. Now, the reason I watched the video was because on a split master cylinder where you got a balance bar, you have to do one front and one rear bleeder all the time. So both master cylinders will get full strokes. So that's how they suggest the only way to bleed a dual master cylinder system. On a single master cylinder system, it's not as important, but on that style it is. So, where's my mouse? Here it is. So here's the original vacuum tool I used here in the shop. Harbor Freight, like 10 bucks. And it actually works really well until you get a system that gets vapor locked. Now you do have this little catch bottle. You have to use the catch bottle because you don't want brake fluid going through your vacuum pump. You want to be able to catch it and only let air get into the pump. But for most of the time, this is a pretty decent way of doing it. This is the tried and true vacuum tester that most shops have in them. Snap-on, Macco, everybody makes these vacuum tanks, and then it's got a small reservoir tank that you fill, put upside down, and then that replenishes the master cylinder as you're running the vacuum bleeder. Hey John, how you doing? Yeah, Ryan says he's been doing it on clutches so fast. Yep, it is. So yeah, so this system, like I've said, it's loud. You got the shop air running through it. The compressor's hauling butt trying to keep up the airflow. And I've had the systems hydrolocked before, so it just never was. I was never satisfied with this route. This is what I have now, and this comes with a lot of the screw-on adapters that fit newer cars. So this works on the newer master cylinders, and I did take a Wilwood, the billet master cylinder. I bought an extra lid, and I put my own fittings in it so I could do the Wilwood master cylinder. So this is the way I've been doing all the systems in the shop until today when I did the purge system. So this works pretty good, but again, being the pressure pot, you have to make sure that you have a really good seal on the master cylinder, or you get fluid coming out all over the place at the master cylinder. But it does work really good for testing when you make all new lines for the car, because now you can pressurize all the fittings, and you can go through and check all your joints to make sure all your double flares and stuff are all seated properly, and that you know before you start really pumping the pressure, you can check for leaks and stuff like that. So it does work well. You just have to have a a master cylinder lid for whichever master cylinder you're working with. That's the only drawback of this system. And of course, this is the old tried and true pressure pot. I've got one of these that's probably 30 years old. About a year ago, I drained all the brake fluid out of it and put fresh fluid in. Just thought it'd probably be a good idea. But again, you know, don't have many master cylinder lid adapters for this system, so kind of hard to do. So this is a purge canister, and the difference between this and a catch canister is the purge canister. I don't know if it's kind of hard to see because it's all white, but there is a tube that runs all the way to the bottom of the tank. So with this system, you fill the container about a third of the way up, and that way the pickup tube is submerged. You undo your other side, the loop side, the free side, and that goes to the caliper. Open the bleeder up, stick that hose on, and then you start pumping the brakes. And it's just like doing a bench bleed on a master cylinder. And then they made that convenient cap that you can put back on, so whatever fluid you have on there, if the car has all clean fluid, you can save the fluid in the container for another brake bleed. And this is a catch container. This container will not work for a purge system. This container, the hose just goes in the lid, and all it's made for is while you're bleeding is to catch whatever fluid comes out of the bleeder screw. That way you're not making a mess on the floor. So if you have this kind of container, you either have to modify it or get a purge container. This will not work for purging. Now, Ryan brought up a good point. Let me see. We go back a couple of slides here. This system, you see here they have a little suction cup. So you can take a piece of plastic or aluminum, anything smooth, get a plate that will cover your master cylinder, and drill a hole for the suction cup to go on it, and you can do a reverse suction. So this, you'd put your plate on top of your master cylinder, or your master cylinder for your clutch, and a lot of motorcycle guys will do it for this way too. So you put that on, you take your lid off, you put your plate on, adapter, and then you use the suction cup and you pull air up through the system, through the master cylinder. It does work really well, especially for small systems. Brake systems with big calipers and stuff, it works, but it takes a long time to build up enough vacuum to work the air out of the calipers that may be 12, 13 feet away. But for small systems, clutch, it works really good for. Another thing it works really good for is power steering systems. You can do the same thing, put that plate over your lid on your reservoir for your power steering, put the little suction cup on there, and draw a vacuum on it, and that will work all the air out of the system basically in reverse. So it's pulling it from the bottom, which air goes up anyway, and it pulls it up through the pump into the reservoir can, and you can bleed it really well. That's a really good thing to do to power steering systems that are brand new. So you can bleed the power steering system two ways, either with a vacuum bleeder, or you jack the car up so there's no load on the wheels and you run the system lock to lock multiple times. That's the only true way to get fluid through the entire system and not damage anything. You don't want to start up a vehicle with a brand new power steering system and not be purged or bled in some manner. You'll have dry spots. The veins in the pump can run dry and groove them, and then you'll have the grooves will create aeration, and you'll have a pump that winds all the time. Rick asked if it'll draw through the proportioning valve as well. Yes. This drawing through the master cylinder with a vacuum, I wouldn't recommend on a brake system. But this type of vacuum system where you're drawing through, or this one where you're drawing through the bleeder screws, that will draw through everything. It'll draw through ABS brake module. It'll draw through everything because it's going to create a vacuum, and being your master cylinder lid is off, the only place it can draw, when it draws a vacuum, it's going to draw the fluid out of the master cylinder. So once it does that, it'll push all the air out of the system. So it's an excellent way of doing it by yourself. A pressure pot is also another way of doing it by yourself, because now you're pressurizing the system at the master cylinder, and it's pushing through the proportioning valve, your anti-lock brake modules, line lock, cutting brake, anything you would have in the system. It's going to push the fluid through it, whereas the vacuum draws it through. Now, the other good thing about either one of these systems is flushing your brake system, because now you can pull brake fluid out or new brake fluid in, or with the pressure pot you're pushing the new brake fluid in, and you can just keep bleeding it until you get clean, fresh fluid coming out of the bleed screws, and now you know you've got an entire flush. Your big fancy flushing machines at repair shops where they're selling the service for flushing, this is what they do. They have a nice machine with a big, huge master cylinder reservoir, a pressure pot. It holds probably 5 to 8 gallons of brake fluid, and they have a really great assortment of master cylinder lids. But that's what they're doing. They're putting 10 psi to the master cylinder, and then you open the bleeders one at a time, and you starting at the farthest away, and you just flushing all the old fluid and the contaminants out of the system till you get clean fluid, and then you lock that bleeder down and go to the next one and work your way up to the front. When you're done, you have a brake system with brand new fluid in it. So there's your pressure pot again. That's what's inside the cabinet on a brake flush machine. And again, your purge system will work for bleeding, but you don't want to use this for flushing, because now the fluid that you have in your container is going to get contaminated with all the trash that's coming out of the rest of the system. Plus, in the purge system, as you're pumping, pushing down and then retracting, the fluid is going back and forth. So it would take an absorbent amount of time to do a flush. But that's, a flush is something you want to do every, depending on how you're using the car. If it sits a lot, every 4 or 5 years. If you're doing high-speed driving and heavy braking, probably a little bit quicker. And a lot of your high-temp brake fluids, ATL comes to my mind right away. They actually sell a blue and a gold fluid. And the reason they do that, there's nothing different from the gold and the blue, but what that is for flushing. So if you've got the gold in your brake system, you flush with the blue until you see blue coming out of your bleeders. Then after the next couple of races and you're ready to flush your fluid again, you go back to the gold and you flush all the blue out till you get gold. So it just makes it real handy. Not all companies do that, but that is always been a really handy thing. So I'm not sure if Motul has a multicolor. I know the Willwood 600, it only comes in gold. So you just have to wait till you see clean fluid and kind of use your own discretion there. But that's how that works. Chris says, can you use one of those tools to remove clutch fluid from the clutch reservoir? Absolutely. Any of these systems will work on a clutch system, hydraulic clutch system, the exact same way they work on a brake system. So, like I say, if you're trying to remove the fluid from the clutch, the purging system will not work for that. You want to use the catch container like this. It actually just catches fluid. And a lot of times, if you have a good working brake system or clutch system, and the master cylinder is higher than the slave unit, you can a lot of times just hook up a hose or a catch can to the bleeder, open the bleeder, take the lid off the reservoir, and it will do what is called a gravity bleed. Because the fluid is higher, it's heavier, and it will push the fluid out the bleed screw because it has somewhere to go, and then you can do it that way. So there's multiple ways of flushing or draining your system, and then for bleeding, you can use those ways for bleeding, or for one person easy bleed, you can do the purge as long as all the fluid is good fluid. So I hope that makes sense. Let me go back to the. So again, here's our different ways of doing it. Now this can be a brake or a clutch. You can do the somebody pumping method, bleeding and catching it in the reservoir can. This is the purge system in a bench bleed. You'd only do this to a master cylinder when it's new. But here is a vacuum bleed, and you can do this for flushing. You can do this for bleeding. So you fill your reservoir with fresh fluid, leave the cap off, open your bleeder, and one bleeder screw at a time, you pull a vacuum, and it draws the air and the fluid through the system into your catch reservoir. Now this is the pressure pot system. Again, it's the same thing. Instead of having to draw the system into a vacuum, you're actually pushing pressure into the master cylinder. This is at a set PSI, usually around 10 PSI, and this is pushing all the air and the fluid through the system into your catch reservoir. So you start at the farthest bleeder screw, and when you're satisfied you got the air out, and if you're doing a flush, you're satisfied you got the trash fluid out, you go to the next one, and so on and so forth till you get completely done. On a clutch reservoir, it'll be the same thing, except for you only have one bleeder to worry about. So it happens a lot quicker. Okay, and again, that's the purge. That's only for bleeding, not for fluid draining or for fluid flushing. This is just for bleeding. Works really well on clutches. Works really good on small master cylinders and small calipers, like on motorcycles. And it works for. It's pretty much the only way to bleed a dual master cylinder with a balance bar in it. So
that's kind of what I put together. Just happened to be doing it this week and thought about it, and I know we've talked about brakes in the past, but I don't think I ever went over bleeding, and that can be a real chore. And I didn't even think about it when I was working on Rihanna 2.0. Kelly's uncle Otis asked me, he goes, "How'd you bleed the brakes by yourself?" And I showed him my pressure pot with my Willwood Master adapter on it, and he's like, "Oh crap! Now there's another tool I gotta buy," because he's always wanting to bleed and flush his brakes on his dragster, on a fast super comp dragster. You only have rear brakes typically on those cars, so you want to make sure you always have really good brake fluid, and it's always bled very well. Another issue with those is the master cylinder is usually below the calipers, so it's always tricky to get the air completely out of the system. I mentioned to him about the residual valves that we've talked about in past shows, and he was unaware that he had one of those in there, so that was something else he was going to add to his. So that's something whenever you're your master cylinder reservoir is below your calipers or even with your calipers, you need to have a one-way check valve. It's really not a check valve, but it's a flow control so that you can keep the fluid pressure up in the caliper and not running all back into the master cylinder, because that will cause where I call a two pump, where the first pump goes down and you really don't do anything, and you hit the pedal the second time. Now the pedal is firm and you got good stopping. That is because there's air trapped in the system. So that's always a good way of testing your system, is when you get your system fully bled, even if you think, man, the pedal feels a little low or something, is do the 2 or 3 pump method. Pump, give it, let it sit, hit it, see where the pedal goes, release it, hit it again, see if the pedal changes in height, release it, hit it again, and see if it moves on the third time or if it gets firmer. If it does, you have air in the system. You need to bleed the system out more. Now, on four-wheel disc, where you have so much surface area, you can sometimes push through the pedal where you're not really pushing through it, but it feels like you're pushing through. So when you're pumping it, you're pumping the brake and then you lock it down, and now you're testing it and you're pumping it with the same effort you were using to bleed the brakes. You can push the master cylinder, the pedal, way down because you're just raising line pressure really high. But then you go to drive the vehicle and realize that at about 1.5 inches to 2 inches, the brakes are grabbing. And that's only because you're applying a huge amount of pressure because there's so much surface area. Drum brakes, because the wheel cylinders are so tiny, it's a lot harder to do that. The line pressure can rise, but you really don't feel it in the pedal. Chris says, so when I flush the brakes with a dual master cylinder, I need 3 people. So when you say dual master cylinder, if you have a standard master cylinder with dual circuits, so you have a master cylinder with the front lines and the rear lines coming out, dual reservoir, and one master cylinder, you only need one person to help you bleed the brakes. If you have 2 master cylinders with a balance bar and a brake pedal, as in a race car would have, then you need to have purge bottles, one on one front, one on one rear, and you just need one person to keep an eye on the bottles so they don't overflow, the master cylinder so it doesn't drain, and then once you see no more air traveling through the hoses, you hold the pedal down and that person goes and locks the bleeders and transfers the hoses to the next bleeder. Okay, right, so you do have a balance bar in your car. Yep. John says, I have a pressure pot for 30 plus years. Yes, those old timers. I mean, that was when all master cylinders had maybe 2 or 3 different lids. Man, what a great time that was to bleed brakes. Because you could do a brake job, slap the pot on there. The pot had so much fluid in there that you could replace a line, replace calipers, replace wheel cylinders, and you could bleed that whole system and never even have to worry about the master cylinder going dry or anything. It was just really great thing. But then here comes plastic reservoirs and all these other shaped reservoir master cylinders, and now now you're spending hundreds of dollars on adapters that you're going to use 1 or 2 times. So it kind of just got put in the corner, and so long, buddy, we're not using you no more. So that's that was the thing there. So that when I purchased a new pressure pot, it came with a lot of the newer, more modern caps, and that system was only maybe $150. So I didn't feel too bad about it. Unfortunately, all the fittings are completely different than the other pressure pot, so I couldn't just buy the adapters. And I was able to steal a couple of the Asian fittings, because I don't really work on any of that stuff, to do my Willwood adapter. But yeah, one of those tools that just lays around now. But yeah, Chris, since your car does have the balance bar, to to flush the system, you need somebody to help you, and you have to, keep filling the reservoir and catching the fluid coming out until you see fresh fluid. And then once you've done that, you're done flushing, then you have to go to the purge system with 2 bottles, and again, 1 person helping you to keep an eye on the lines till the lines have no more air coming out of them, and keeping sure the reservoirs stay full, and then tightening down the bleeder screw to move to the next one. Now, one of the things there is if you have let's say you have a rear caliper that's still pumping air and the front caliper is not, you still have to keep the front caliper open until the back one stops pumping air. Or you can move it to another bleeder screw, like Willwood calipers have 2 bleeders on each caliper, so you have to do that on every bleeder screw. So you can move it or move the side that's good to a new bleeder, but you have to keep working the one that's trapped air in until you work it completely out before you can move on to the next one. So it's a little tedious. Now, on the Cup car, all I've done right now, because I'm by myself, is I pumped it till I thought I was getting pretty good pedal feel. I couldn't see the hoses to see if they had air trapped. But what I could do when I would pump it a number of times is I would go to each hose and see if the fluid was gravity feeding from the master cylinder. Once it was gravity feeding and I didn't see any air coming out, I went ahead and pulled the hose off and closed the bleed screw by myself. And then I went to the next bleeder. Now, that's not the way Willwood chose to do it, and I don't have I don't have the ability to move the car yet, so I can't tell you if that was 100% fully bled, but we'll find out here shortly. John says he thinks his holds a gallon. I know they hold a ton of fluid. Yeah, I think my old one was a gallon and maybe a little bit more than a gallon. Now, when I worked at the fleet shop at Doug's place, we had one of the flush machines, and that one actually held, I think it holds 3 gallons. But that's for flushing and bleeding. And of course, being a newer machine, it came with an assortment, a very large assortment of reservoir caps. But of course, that machine was also $4,000 or something like that. So, in a shop environment where you're doing flushes almost daily, the machine will pay for itself. But for us home guys, that's out of our realm. So that's kind of where we were at with that. Hopefully that all made sense. Hopefully next Tuesday I'll be able to give you guys a video of the Cup car running, and I'll have an update on the Palm Beach Motorsports facility from the county meeting. Of course, that's only going to really pertain to us in the local area, but if anybody ever wants to come down to South Florida to race in the winter when you guys are snowed in and have bad weather, it could be of importance to you then. So we'll see how that all works out. But pretty much all I had tonight. Hopefully you guys were able to get some information out of that. Chris and I have been working on his fuel cell stuff, trying to get him a fuel system all set up. The current fuel tank he has in the car is not working properly. It's having real bad surging issues. So hopefully by next week I'll have some finished information and be able to go over that fuel system, what we're doing on his car. Be good for EFI guys. Most of the time, if you have like a tank sink or some other kind of tank that is converted to EFI, it has some kind of containment tank inside the main tank, just like all the OEMs do. They have some type of containment baffling or containment bottle inside the gas tank. That usually works really well for cars, let's say up to 400 or 500 horsepower. But once you get over that and you start flowing a lot of fuel, those tanks then start to become issues where they don't. The reservoir tank does not hold enough fluid, and you can suck it dry with multiple fuel pumps or a large external fuel pump. So, or if you're autocross or road course racing, it's a big issue. Now, depending on the availability of tanks and what you have to work with, a lot of times you can put a hydromat in the tank if you're running external. Holley does have hydromats for the in-tank pumps, but again, if you're running multiple pumps and it's sucking the tank dry, it's still, even with the hydromat, it's still not going to be sufficient. But what we're going to do in Chris's car is a fuel cell, and we're going to do a custom sized container, collector container inside the tank for his 2 pumps. We are going to put the hydromat on the inline in-tank pumps, and with a couple fill check balls, 1.25 inch check balls that will go into the side of the containment tank or collector tank to keep it full, so that no matter what, as long as there's fuel above inch in the tank, the collector balls will allow fluid fuel into the collector tank, and the collector tank will hopefully have a large enough reservoir to feed the pumps. And of course, the return line coming back from the engine is going to dump into the collection tank, so it will help keep it full. So it's kind of like a surge system, but it's less plumbing, less fuel pumps. You don't have to worry about having a second fuel tank or fuel can to mount somewhere in the car. That becomes a really big issue, especially in a street car where you want to be able to use your trunk for storage. And you just don't need another container of fuel in the car. It's bad enough you have a fuel cell in the car in case of an accident or something like that. So it just cuts down on the clutter in my mind. I know in my 50, I had a 26-gallon fuel cell I custom built for it, and with the hydromat and with the pickup blowing right directly back onto the hydromat, I had the tank was divided into thirds, so I had a third left-hand reservoir, a third right-hand reservoir, and I had a third as the center where the hydromat sock was, and I had run that tank all the way down to a gallon, and never had a problem. When it got down to maybe 2 gallons and the gas gauge was already showing E, you could get a little bit of surging on hard cornering, but I mean that only happened once or twice. But as long as the tank had 1/8 of a tank or more, 0 issues autocrossing that car all the time. And on my CL2 race pack data recorder, I had seen corner loads of 1.1, 1.2 Gs. So that should have been plenty of G load to create an issue if there was one to be had. So that's what we're doing with Chris's fuel cell. So if we get some answers and get some, I'll get some pictures together, and we'll go over that next week. So anyway, I hope everybody has a good week for the rest of the week. Hopefully, a lot of us on the East Coast, we're done with Debbie. She's moved north. You guys, for anybody that's in the Carolinas, probably into Virginia tomorrow, try to stay dry. Hopefully the storm is weakened enough that it's just a big rainmaker. Hopefully you're not getting the flooding that the west coast of Florida got. They got some pretty extreme flooding over there. So with that, I think I'm going to say goodnight. Thank you to everybody that comes on the show every week and watches. Thank you to the new people that came on the show for the first time. Don't anybody that's watching, don't be bashful. Put stuff in the comment and the chat. It's great to have the going back and forth with information, kind of like a great big bench racing session. You know, we all can't be in the same place at the same time, so this way we all get to hang for an hour and BS, and you know, we all can learn something and just have a good time. So we'll just you know, we'll end it up with that. So good night, everybody, and we'll see everybody next week. If you haven't, go check out the new Cup Car Project Part 1 video. Let me know what you think. Leave comments. Let me know. So anyway, see you all later. Peace.